strange times in which we're living. I hope you're okay. You join me in the corner of the studio that up until Saturday was a mess with stuff all over the floor, piled up, totally inaccessible. So on Saturday I finally got around to putting a shelf up to put all of my basing materials up here on the walls. So that's all out the way and nice. So I thought I would stand, albeit slightly stooped, in this corner. And yes, so you can see my nice wall units. I'm a little bit scared that when I pull these out, they're going to come off the wall, and all of these little trays of leaf litter and static grass and mulch and things are just going to go broof, and there'll be mixed scenics all over the floor. But I hope that won't happen. They're securely nailed up, so I hope they will be fine. I was looking at my back catalogue of videos now, and it's been 2 months since I did my painting of my Advanced Hero Quest figures, which is just mental. Like, where's the time going at the moment? I have no idea. But it made me think about the bases that I had on here. So obviously these guys are on plain black bases, and I think I mentioned in the video that when I was doing my Hero Quest diorama, I wanted the adventurers to be able to come off the diorama and go onto bases to be used in adventures, and my plan was to have the tab painted black on them so that there was a bit of shadow at their feet that could blend in with the diorama base, and then they could just sit on a black base. And I think the plain black base actually looked quite smart on them. Makes them look kind of like display figures, which for a board game I think works quite nicely. But then I was having a flick through the Hero Quest White Dwarf articles, and obviously these are the Mike McVeigh prototypes, and they've got this very classic kind of green sand dry brushed base on the heroes there, and I thought, well, maybe it'd be quite nice to do that. And I've been wanting to return to my Hero Quest miniatures. When I was doing the Advanced Hero Quest diorama, I had an idea of rebasing all of my Hero Quest miniatures that I've done in the same way as these guys, so they would all be on black round bases. So I bought a bag of black round bases without slits in, and I've got my small collection of Hero Quest miniatures, and I thought I'll slowly start clipping the bases off, working through repainting them, because at the moment they're fairly basic paint job, and I've got sticky vinyl dungeon tiles that have been taken from the Hero Quest board on the bottom of them. They're not brilliant, they peel off, but they look quite fun. But I thought I'll up-spec those, and I'll put them on nice bases and hopefully have quite a nice looking Hero Quest set. So I came up with three base types. So there's the plain black, nothing on it, and I chopped the tab off an orc, and I photographed him on a plain black. Let's see if I can make the camera focus on him. There we go, on a plain black base. I then did a sand and green dry brush, and I put the orc on, and I photographed the orc on the green dry brush base, and then I did the same thing, just sand, dry brushed grey there, and I put the orc on the grey base, and I photographed him, and then I put all of that on a Hero Quest forum on Facebook, or a Hero Quest page on Facebook, and asked people, which one do you like best? And I didn't really have any preference, between the three of them. The black ones I think look quite nice and smart. The green ones obviously have that kind of classic Hero Quest prototype look, and the grey ones are a bit of a nod to the fact that it's dungeon, not open grassland. And overwhelmingly, the response was grey dry brushed base. And the really interesting thing was that although previously I didn't have any preference, when that came out as the overwhelming preference for people, I reacted really quite strongly against it. I was like, oh, I don't want to do that. So that was a good lesson for me that that's definitely not what I should go. But I thought that was interesting that people chose that. So I thought maybe it's because it's a HeroQuest forum. Lots of people were saying, oh no, do sculpted flagstones and things. And sculpted flagstones are nice, but they're not a very classic look. That they look kind of modern, and although that's nice, I want to keep quite a kind of classic vintage vibe to this. So I thought, okay, well, I'll put the same thing on one of the old Hammer pages and see what people come up with. And there was a bit more variation, but again, a lot of people were liking C. So I think there are a few reasons for that. Firstly, I think it contrasts best with the colours that are on the Orc, but that's not necessarily going to be the case with all of the things that I put on these bases. I think partly the green colour wasn't showing up very well, so it was looking a bit sort of drab. I think to go with the kind of classic theme on the HeroQuest prototype miniatures, I maybe need to dry brush that with a bit more yellow, make it ping a little bit more, and I think maybe then it will sit with the Orc a bit better. Surprised about the black one, but possibly not, because people are looking at basing for wargaming figures, whereas I'm looking at this as a bit more kind of representational ornament figures then placed on a game board. So it made me think a little bit. Bases are the ultimate kind of personal touch, aren't they? Everyone's got their own take on bases, but it made me sort of think, what is the base? You know, and a lot of because another thing people were coming up with was this clear base thing. You should put them on clear acrylic bases because then they look right in everything that you put them on. And I've seen that done on a lot of wargames stuff, where they're like, if you're working on a snow table or a desert table or a grass table, you want them to be able to fit all of those things, so you should put them on a clear acrylic. And I really react against the clear acrylic bases because they're kind of chunky and they're shiny, and it just looks like the model's either floating or it's standing on a slab of ice. It just doesn't really work for me. I don't think it blends in with all terrain. I think it blends in with no terrain. But it's obviously very personal to what people like to do. I think for me, I've always seen the base as a bit of a display pedestal, and I guess that comes from being more of a painter than a gamer in a lot of cases. I've always wanted to keep the black trim, although my 40k models don't have that as a nod to the kind of sand coloured bases that were in White Dwarf at a certain period. But I've always wanted to keep that black rim around the base so that they very much look like they're standing on a display plinth, and keep the world of the figure on the top of the base. So it doesn't matter to me if they're still on a snow base, but they've got a grass field, or they have snow on their base but they're still in a grassy field. That really doesn't matter, except possibly for taking nice photographs of them. What matters is that the figure is contained within the world of its own base. And for this, I'm very much going, as I say, for playing pieces on a board, and I'm still leaning towards just putting them on a plain black base. Partly because I've got 200 odd miniatures to trim the bases off, and I don't want anything that's too involved. Partly because if I want these guys to be on a diorama and then removable and put on these black bases, that's going to be harder if they've got a textured surface, although I guess I could do a shadow on the base to mount them in. But I'm still leaning towards just having a plain black base. The only slight problem with that is that these have a bit of a ridge. I don't know if you can see that, where the slit isn't cut out, but it's still visible on the top. So that maybe detracts a little bit. That might mean that it needs some finishing on the top. So I'm going to keep playing with those. But if you've got any thoughts, that are possibly not go with the go with the grey, or maybe they go with the grey, but justify why that is. Try and think about why that seems to be working and the others don't. I'm trying to go for something that's classic, so I'm trying to avoid things like tufts, things like sculpted elements, or resin cast bases, things that make them look like quite modern miniatures. I'm trying to avoid something that's a lot of work, because there's a lot of stuff to base up, and I already want to revisit and pick out highlights on some of these models that I did quite quickly, and something that's going to enable my hero figures that are plugging in and out of these bases to blend in while still being able to fit into the diorama. So it's a bit of a quandary, but I just thought that was very interesting insight as to what people thought the right basing was. And I guess I was expecting that the Hero Crest crowd would be looking at these as sort of toy soldiers on a or board game pieces on a board, whereas the old Hammer crowd might be looking at them as figures that needed to blend in with their surroundings. So I would get a slightly different response, but it seemed to be the same response across the board. So that was interesting. So yeah, let me know your thoughts on which basing to go for, and if you've got any tips. At the moment, I'm clipping the bases off with a pair of clippers, and then using a razor saw and a Dremel to file those around, because if you just trim them straight off the bases, their feet are a little bit too thin. But if you don't trim them off at the bottom, then they've got really chunky bits stood on the bottom of their feet. So, got any suggestions for how best to remove Hero Quest figures from bases? Let me know. Any preference between these three, or you want to come up with something entirely different? Let me know. Point me in direction of things that you think are worthwhile. I'll carry on thinking about it, and I'll see you next week.